One of the joints that always people struggle with in the workshop is the dovetail joint, which is traditionally used for drawer fronts, etc., and good carcass work. And the SIP dovetail jig is an ideal tool for producing very accurate, good consistent dovetails. The SIP dovetail jig is designed to accept woods up to 300mm wide, so it will enable you to do a wide variety of dovetailing. And as it arrives and you take it out of the box, this is the actual jig you will have, along with a single cutter to go into a 1/4 inch router, which is a 7/16 bearing guided cutter. The idea of the bearing is that actually runs into the finger template which sits across here to give you the consistent cut that gives our dovetails. The bearing, or the template that actually comes with the jig, is a 1/2 inch section, so you're getting a 1/2 inch space with a 1/2 inch finger repetitively along. For finer dovetails, you can actually get an optional extra of a 7/16 template, which is a finer template, or a wider 9/16 template to give larger dovetails. Those dovetails can be seen in these samples here. The 1/2 inch being the standard cut that you'll get from the template when you buy it, and the finger template that comes with it. The 7/16 being the smaller dovetails, and the 9/16 being the larger. On these same width sections you can see that on the 9/16 you're only getting 4 dovetails, but the edges are tighter to the edges of the board, whereas on the 7/16 it's actually 5 dovetails for the same width. Changing the templates is very easy, just by undoing 4 screws and replacing with the template that you actually require. The jig itself comprises of various sections. The template that we've just discussed. This is the rear stop against which the router goes to give the depth of cut. The hold down clamp on the top and the hold down clamp on the front. These are the parts that actually hold the wood whilst we're actually routing it, as it needs to be strongly held in the actual jig itself. The dovetails, when they cut, are cut as a single action, so the wood is actually presented with one piece against the other, as you can see, to give the consistent cut here. To achieve this, we need to offset the sides of the wood. Otherwise, if this was cut at the same position, when the dovetails go together, we will actually find that the actual sections will then be offset. So we need to offset the wood prior to making the cut. That's very easily done if we take the top off the actual, we lift that to one side. You can now see on the lower section of the jig we have 2 arms here. These need to be set at a specific spacing to tie in with the comb or the template that we're using. Now the easiest way to do this is actually to cut yourselves some sections of wood that are appropriate to the actual template you're using. So being the 1/2 inch one, we'd use the 1/2 inch, 9/16 or 7/16 being the width of the actual wood. With the 1/2 inch, if we're using that template, we actually want that spacing to be such that when the template or this spacer is against this edge, the leading edge of this is then flush with that edge, and that is giving you the 1/2 inch offset. When this is done this is simply adjusted just using a spanner just to undo the 2 nuts here and here, and you can actually repeat the process and do it on this side as well. If we reinstate the top of the jig, we can now screw that down, and using our template again, what we want is for that to slide in so that then the edge of that template is against the edge of our stop. So the first cut is in line with one of the openings actually in the template. The other important consideration is the actual depth of cut. Now when the cutter is actually presented, we've got to make sure that the bearing runs into the actual fingers of the template. And the best way of setting it, and to work to initially on setting up, is to set the tip of the router cutter 17mm from the actual sole of the router. And again, an easy way of doing that is make yourself a little template, just like that you can sit over the top to actually set your router cutter to the correct depth. Now when you first do your joints, you may find they're a little tight or a little loose. By raising or lowering the cutter, we'll adjust that joint to make it a perfect fit. Now, we've got two pieces of wood here ready to actually dovetail, and the joint itself, as you can see here, goes together nicely, but the whole joint is actually cut in one operation. The parts of the wood being offset to each other when the joint is actually cut. And it's very easily done on the dovetail jig, and I'll run you through both how to set it up and how to cut the joint. First of all, to cut the pins, we want to insert the piece of wood that the pins are going to be into, just into the front of the machine, and just support the work using the clamp hold down bar. The piece that the sockets are going into is going to be brought in from the back of the machine against the stop on the side, which again I'll describe in a moment, and butted up to our piece of wood at the front, which our pins are going to be into. And again, the lever just locked to hold it. We can now bring this up until it's flush, and we've got a level position across the boards, as you can see here. The two boards being staggered by the offset in the supports, which I showed you how to set earlier. To do the cut, first of all, using the router, we want to do a scribing cut along this edge to prevent any tear out in later cuts. So the first cut will be to scribe along the lower section here. You can now see the shoulder line that's been formed using that cut. From here, we will now introduce the router coming into each of these fingers in turn to produce the cut we want, using the backrest as our stop. Another joint that this dovetail jig can do, which people don't often realise, is you can actually do a sliding dovetail, which enables shelf supports and the like to be made very easily. And we can use the jig to cut the sliding section. And it's very easily done by taking the existing template and physically turning it round, simply by undoing and doing up again the 4 screws that hold it in place and locking that in position. So if we want to perform the sliding dovetail along here, all we need to do is in exactly the same manner, insert the wood into the front, the piece to be cut, put a packing piece in behind, which won't actually get cut, lock that into place, We can now bring that up to our template and lock that into place. It's now just a case of running our bearing along this edge to give us the cut. Reversing the wood. And there you have the perfect sliding dovetail.